Hello and welcome to my Milestone 2 CST-391 project. So this is a C# web API, which is going to function as a backend technology for us to be able to work with our proposed application for the Milestone, which is going to be a goal tracking application. So let's jump right into it. So first what we'll cover is the different projects you see here. We actually have the Web API project and two library classes. If we open up the Web API, we see we have a controller for goals. Our main object is a goal which has an ID and a title. We have the program.cs file and we have an app settings.json, which are key. In our goal tracking app.bl, which stands for business layer, we have our services class. And that services class is what the middleman to our DAL data access layer, which has our data context, which interacts with our SQL database. So we're not going to start the app yet. There's one thing we must do beforehand, and that is we have to make sure we have the SQL connection set up. So if we go to our program.cs file in goaltrackingapp.api project, we can see we have an ensure DB is created function. This is going to make sure we have our tables for the goals. Pretty much our goals table will be set up in the database. So what we want to first do is I'm just going to make it in the SQL Server Object Explorer within Visual Studio for simplicity. We'll just go ahead and make a new database real quickly and we'll just name this goal tracking database and we'll press OK. Once that's made, we want to go into its properties. From there, we will just copy the connection string and we want to go into the app settings within the web API. So I have added a parameter for the connection string, which we will connect to right here. We'll just copy and paste and we'll go ahead and save. Now that the database is connected, our table will surely be created. We can go ahead and begin this. So now that it's starting, you can see we hit the breakpoint to make sure the DB is created. So we'll just jump through this real quickly. We get access to the data context, and with the data context, we create the table. Everything was successful, and we could just continue from here. Now our actual application has opened up, so I'll just put it off to the side right here for us. We'll clear some of this up, and we can see that we're using Swagger as our API interface. We have a get all goal items. We have a post, which will create a new goal item. Then we can look for goals specifically by ID. We can update with the put method, and obviously we can delete goals by ID. So in Visual Studios, I will now navigate over to the goals controller, which I have placed breakpoints on all major RESTful methods. So we'll just go ahead and start off with the get method. We'll open this up. We can see that pretty much this is what our string should look like, and if there's multiple items, it's going to be multiple objects showing up. We'll press try it out, and let's just go ahead and execute. Now, if you look on the left side, we can see we have hit the breakpoint for the get. Now, as we go through here, we're going to see that we have a services read-only variable, which was passed in through the constructor, and that is what's going to give us that separation of responsibilities so that, we have this code separated, and for, not all our code can be accessed that easily. Added security is pretty much for it, and for simplicity and for a more cleaner architecture. So we'll just jump right into this. We can see we get into the services class. From the services class, we have a method called getAllGoals. This will lead us into the data context, which was also passed in through the constructor the same way. And we'll just go in. Now we're in the data context, and we'll go ahead return goals. We can see that we scaffold right back outwards to the goal, and we finish this off, and for some reason a type error occurred. So now that we know the flow, I'll just go ahead and disable this, and we'll just press execute it once again. We'll cancel this, try it out, execute. And so obviously we get a response body of 200, which means everything was okay. It was a success. And obviously we haven't added any items yet. So now what we could do is we can go up to post, and we have the structure of what it's going to look like. And one thing is that our ID is going to increment by itself. So I can actually go ahead and get rid of this parameter. And let's just go ahead and give something. So let's say complete milestone to Screencast as one of our objects. We'll press execute. You can see we hit the post item. If we quickly go through the flow, we're in services. Then when the actual data context, you can see that we try to add the entity. Then we save changes. No errors occurred, so obviously we're going to return back true. And we're finished with this flow. I'll go ahead and disable this breakpoint now. And we can see that we got a response of true. If we go back over to goals and we execute again, we can see now we got our actual first item we add to the database table. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple more items so we can test out some of the other methods. I will go back into post, and now I can say complete activity 1. We'll execute that. We can see we get a response of 200 true. We could do complete quiz, execute that. We get everything seems to be working good. Complete participation, execute that, and let's just go ahead and create one that we will end up deleting later, which we'll call dummy record, and execute that. Everything looks good. We'll go back into our get all, which will return all items. We press that, we can see we get all items returned. Now that we have all items back, we can test, and we have an array of items. We can go into the get by ID. Now this one, pretty simple. You just go ahead, give it an ID. I'll just pick 3 to start off with, and we'll see what we get for a response. It loads. You can see we hit the breakpoint. Once again, we go through services, hit the database, and we just perform a link query to find the entity. Then we return the entity back, and you can see we now have that one item by its ID. Go ahead, disable that. Let's try item number 4. Execute. Item number 4 is now, and item number 5, which is dummy record, should show up, and that is exactly the case. Now what we're going to test out is the actual put record. So I'm going to update record 5. I'll just go down to the put record. You have to give it a specific record, which is record 5. And obviously we don't really need this because it is auto incremented, and we don't want to change the ID. We just want to change some content. So I'll just change this to all capital dummy record, and just for added differential, just added 2 at the end. Execute that. We can see we enter the put method, go through services, into the DB. We can see we first look for the record. The record is not null. We go ahead, add the updates, and then we save changes, and we return true all the way right back to the controller. And then I can go ahead and disable this breakpoint. We can see that we get a response of true. Now we want to make sure that this is actually the case. We can see that this was the record before. If we execute, we can see it is now updated. We can check in the entire list too to make sure. We can see that there's no lowercase dummy record. It is now updated. And lastly, we can do deletes. We'll just press try it out, enter 5, execute. We can see we finally hit the last method on our list. Go through the flow, services, into the data context. We first search for the entity. The entity does exist, is not null. We go ahead and perform a remove method, save changes, and everything looks good. Go ahead and hit disable, and we can see we get a response to true, and just to make sure it's deleted. First, what we'll do is we'll execute this by its ID to see if we can find it. And you can see that it actually does return, which is interesting. But let's check up here. You can see we no longer have the ID here. Let me just double check this one again. We should have gotten a false, but not sure. Let's try 6, maybe because 6 was a record. Interesting. Well, the important thing is that it is removed from the entire list. As we can see, we only have up to 4 items now. If I wanted to delete another item, I could just specify it, execute it, and for some reason it wants to check the database, which is fine. We'll just go ahead, continue on that. Go back to all our list of arrays. We can see we lost that one. Not a proof that we can get rid of one in the middle. So if I delete item number 2, hit the execute button, everything looks good. Go ahead and do a get return again. And you can see items are being deleted. Lastly, what we could check is we can actually open up the SQL Server. We can go to tables. We see we actually have a table in there called goals. We can view its data. And that should reflect what we got going on. So if I just execute this one more time, this is what we got from the API calls, and that is exactly what's going on in the database. So this is pretty much my C# Web API backend for my goal tracking application. And thank you for watching this video.